Today, you're in for a treat because I'm going to talk about one of many, but a very primary issue that is near and dear to my heart and my personal experience. Hi, I'm Sophia Amargi, and welcome to my show, The Sophia Amargi Show. Let's get hip to the trip. I married a sociopath. Go figure. I'm a nice girl. I come from a nice family. I never met a sociopath before in my life. Or if I did, I certainly didn't recognize them as sociopathic. So let's start at the beginning. We're talking about sociopathy today. And that seems to be a little bit of a current topic because I watched the TV show Dirty John. And throughout the course of watching that show, I was catching my breath multiple times to see my ex-husband so accurately represented. Thank goodness. He wasn't a psychopath, which is what the guy Dirty John was. My ex-husband was a sociopath, and we're going to get into sociopathy, and we're going to talk about why so many women are actually at risk to be manipulated, to be stolen from, to be mistreated by sociopaths. So first and foremost, let's talk about the difference between a sociopath, otherwise known as an antisocial personality disordered individual, or a psychopath. The primary variable here is the issue of morality, responsibility, and remorse. We could call those the 3 R's. A sociopath is almost exactly like a psychopath, but whereas a psychopath is capable of murdering you, a sociopath will just manipulate you to the point where you wish they would kill you because it's so painful. Sociopaths don't typically murder people. Psychopaths do. The antisocial personality disorder of a sociopath is all about manipulation for personal gain. They are impulsive. They do not take responsibility. They will spin every single thing that you tell them into something that it is not. So pretty soon you actually don't even know what's up or what's down. Now, everybody talks about narcissism. Oh, my boss is a narcissist, or my boyfriend's a narcissist, or I married a narcissist. Well, here's a tip. All sociopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are sociopaths. So if we stay focused on sociopathy, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I had a first husband. Really great guy, super straight guy, meaning he was a mergers and acquisitions partner with a big fancy law firm, and we had a really great and very cushy life. And that was fine because I sort of grew up with an expectation around me that that would be the kind of guy that I would marry. So I more or less followed that story and married that guy. During the course of that relationship, I began to wake up and I started to develop and sort of get in touch with my own spiritual hunger. And I actually spent 3 years in my first marriage trying to get my first husband to come with me on some various different kinds of spiritual explorations. Let's go to an ashram. Let's go to a retreat center. Let's explore this. Let's learn about that. And he just didn't want to do it. It was outside of his wheelhouse and was experienced by him, I think, as way too threatening. So I made the decision to leave. And I'm a big adventure traveler. I've been adventure traveling around the world since I was 16 years old. And so I backpacked around the world for 2 years by myself once we got divorced. Now, when I came back, after 2 weeks back in America, I met the man who became my second husband, now my second ex-husband. A trip of that caliber and a trip of that nature, the adventure of that large of a kind of an adventure and that big of a block of time, takes a long time to integrate and metabolize. I was traveling around the world by myself for 2 years. I climbed Kilimanjaro. I went across India by myself to get into Nepal. I learned how to dive in the Seychelles. I tracked gorillas in Zaire. I had many fabulous adventures. And when I came back to America, all of them were unintegrated. And I was really kind of just vibrating at this place of adventure and freedom and sort of a happy-go-lucky kind of an attitude. And I met my second husband at the gym. And we started talking, and we ended up going out on a couple of different dates. And I came to understand that he was constantly on the verge of being evicted from his apartment due to lack of paying his rent. And I thought that that was kind of adorable because he was struggling. And it seemed so anti-authority in some way to me. It just kind of tells you where my head was at the time. I was kind of looking, somewhat unconsciously, for the antidote to the very straight-laced life that I led with my first husband. And so his nonchalance about the fact that he was always on the verge of getting evicted, I found sort of oddly charming and kind of okay. I thought he was just struggling. And then one day I had a little dinner party to introduce him to some of my friends. And I don't know if all of you have watched that TV show, Dirty John, but there is a moment that this man comes to the door for his first date and he's wearing shorts. My second husband, before he was my second husband, came to the dinner party wearing cut-off shorts, but they were suit trousers that he had cut off. And he was wearing like tie shoes that would go with a suit. So wildly inappropriate. Let's track that as red flag number 2. Red flag number 1 is about the fact that he was always on the verge of getting evicted from his apartment. Red flag number 2, that he came so wildly inappropriately dressed to my dinner party and didn't think anything of it. And I tried to have a conversation with him to sort of help him up level and to help him get hip to the trip. And he was happy to take my guidance. But actually, as I look back on this now, the entire time I was with him, I never felt safe. Eventually, our relationship established itself to the point where we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and I was moving to California to go to graduate school. And I asked him if he wanted to come here with me. And he said, yes, absolutely, I want to come with you. So we moved out here to California. I applied to graduate school and I was accepted. What he said to me was that we would use my credit and my credit card to rent an apartment. Again, let's say that that's red flag number 3. I didn't think anything of it. So I said, sure, fine. I had great credit. I had a couple of credit cards. He had no credit and he had no credit cards. He had declared bankruptcy at that point. Is that red flag number 4, 5, 6, or 7? I can't keep count. None of which registered for me. I never met somebody like this who was lagging in all of these separate areas. So I cared for him, loved him, let's say at that point. So now I have an apartment with this guy. Everything is in my name. I get accepted to graduate school and he asks me to take out as much additional money in graduate school student loans as I possibly could, which I did because I didn't know he was a sociopath. And once he got me to have the money, he said, you know, Sophia, I don't really feel like I'm ever going to get ahead with you if we mingle our money. At this point, we were engaged. He said, so I want to have separate accounts and I'll hold on to this money. Well, my first husband pretty much paid our bills and kind of ran that infrastructure. So it didn't really seem unusual to me that I would trust him. After all, we had already gotten engaged. So let's think about this. My ex-husband took all my money and he ruined my credit. And he had a manic episode. He threatened the life of our child. He was 5150 to the psych ward. It stopped feeling safe. We divorced. And then at random times, he stopped paying child support. At random times, he'd pay child support and there would be no money in the account. He was mandated by the court to pay 1/2 of my graduate school student loan, but he blackmailed me into releasing him from that debt so that my son could be stable. And instead of going back and forth between us, just so that my son could live at my house and see his dad whenever he wanted. I'm sharing my story with you for a very particular reason. The upshot of my experience is, for 20 years, I held this as my personal shame. I thought somehow that it was my fault. And I'm a hip chick. I'm good at what I do. I'm smart. I'm talented. And I kept this as like my dark, dirty little secret because he literally had convinced me that I was the problem and not him. So I've decided to use my story and out myself and share my own experience with you as a guideline for what you can look for and how you have to know this is not your shame. So one of the diagnostic criteria, which we are going to post up on the screen shortly, is a significant impairment in interpersonal interactions and relationships. So sociopaths are highly secretive, but they present as if they are not secretive at all. They want you to know everything about them. And the whole time they're planning on stealing your money, which is what happened to me, or they're planning on making a coup, or they are maintaining friendships with people under the guise of authenticity and transparency, when in fact, there's nothing about them that's authentic or transparent. Case in point, my ex-husband owned a piece of property and he began to build this as a retreat center for the spiritually minded. And he made a whole series of videos about being a steward of the land and really valuing this piece of property and holding it in high esteem and feeling gratitude that he was being able to helm this project as a place of healing and self-reflection. When in fact, what he was doing was taking his investors' money and buying up coal, betting against the property itself. So again, we have somebody who is presenting themselves as one thing and yet sort of behind the scenes behaving in a way that is completely opposite or antithetical or in fact even challenges their sort of social presentation. Lying is kind of embedded in the psyche of the sociopath. And to them, it's not experienced as if they're lying. They are not registering that this is a blatant lie. Instead, they think that they're behaving normally and appropriately. Well, some of the pathology of the sociopath is this extreme degree of manipulation. And it's not outright and obvious. For example, if you go on a first date with somebody and they beat you up on your first date, you're definitely not going to go on a second date with them. So whenever anybody is being physically abused, the abuse starts off very slow and it's kind of creeping. And the individual that's being abused isn't able to recognize what's happening until there comes a time when they actually are being beaten and maybe need to seek hospital treatment for their wounds that they've suffered. It's the same with the sociopath. The manipulation starts in very small ways. I'd like to borrow your car. I have something to do. This is an individual who is very capable of assessing what you're about, where your weaknesses are, and if I may be so bold, this is somebody that can figure out your wound structure. Oh, you've been in other relationships before and people have betrayed you? I would never betray you. So they behave in a way that is non-betrayal. They'll tell you where they're going, what they're doing, who they're going with. They'll let you track their movements in order to get you to trust them, to soften your resistance when they really become manipulative. The sociopath is stable in their manipulative behavior. And this is really important. They're never not manipulative. So the sociopath, again, will tell you what they have come to understand you want to hear. They will behave in ways that make you feel safe with them. And then they will steal from you or manipulate you to get their own needs and gains met. They have very little grief or remorse, and they do not understand that their behavior is a betrayal of your trust. And the normal kinds of communications, when you sit down with the person that you care about or your husband or the person that you're in a relationship with, and you want to process things and really tell them how you feel, and then you expect a different outcome. That does not work with a sociopath. Again, the sociopath will tell you everything they think that you want to hear or that they want you to hear and know. And then nothing will change for them. So their manipulation remains stable. They don't change. They don't grow in this way. They don't learn from their mistakes. They'll continue to do the same thing consistently over time. Sociopaths are born. They're really not made. And there's been a lot of conversation about the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. To clarify this, a psychopath is capable of killing you for no reason whatsoever, for their own amusement, to settle a score, for any reason at all. Whereas a sociopath does have a moral compass. However, there's only a moral compass insofar as it suits the needs of the sociopath. So they won't kill you. But as I've said earlier, They'll just manipulate you to such a point where you lose track of what actually is up or down. In fact, it took me 20 years to recognize that my ex-husband is indeed a sociopath. Every dialogue that we had, every attempt to navigate a situation or to jointly parent was met with ongoing resistance that left me believing that at some point this guy would just wake up and get it, that he would get him to the trip and that he would do the right thing. The sociopath is unable to differentiate what exactly the right thing is as it stands separate from their own needs. And as an organism, as a biological organism committed to its own survival, the sociopath will tell anybody anything in order to get its needs met, which it feels will ensure its survival. No matter that they've stolen all your money, broken your trust, run off with your car, taken over the deed of your house, things like this. It doesn't really matter. And it doesn't register for them as a kind of immoral behavior. So just to be clear, sociopathy is part of hard wiring. It doesn't have to do with drug use. It doesn't have to do with medication. It doesn't really have to do with how the individual is parented. This is someone who is born sociopathic, and perhaps with the right kind of environmental support, this might not be fully actualized in a lifetime, but in many cases, it actually is. So then this kind of brings us back to nature versus nurture, and what comes first, what's more important, and what has more influence. Bottom line, for your psychopath or your sociopath, we are looking at hard wiring. So let's talk about how to spot a sociopath. So we can be with people that are free and easy and unconventional and don't play by the rules. But the sociopath difference is really about the fact that they feel that the rules are not made for them, that they get to operate not just by different rules, but outside of the rules entirely. So to spot a sociopath, you must look for somebody who is a habitual liar. And it's not that easy to spot because they're really sophisticated and manipulative. So just as a review, what becomes important is noticing that a sociopath will tell you what they believe you want to hear. And then they're going to go off and do whatever they want. They're highly egotistical. They really kind of follow this Übermensch or Superman notion about themselves, as if they're sort of keyed into a particular secret about how the universe works, and nobody else gets that secret. Their belief seems to be that sort of Superman way of seeing themselves in relationship to the world allows them to play by their own rules, not the general rules that most of us in society subscribe to. These are people who do not manage money. These are people who do not pay bills on time. These are people who do not feel it necessary to play by the normal rules. So they're often sort of behaving in a way that seems perhaps antisocial, but it's being presented to you as if this is what real freedom looks like. I can do it. You ought to be able to trust me so you can do it too. They scapegoat all the time. Certainly when I was in the relationship with my ex-husband, he was blaming me for things that he would not follow through on. So he used to say all the time, yes, I'll pick up our child at this time. And then he would be hours late. And when I would confront him with this, he would bait and switch. They are masters at the bait and switch. So yes, I'll pick up our son at 6 p.m., but he maybe wouldn't come until 8. The child would be upset and I would be upset. So I would confront my ex-husband and I would say, but you said that you would be here at 6. Why are you here at 8? The bait and switch is, oh, Sophia, you're so reactive. You're so emotional. Why are you so upset? I'm here now. I said I would be here and I'm here. You're the one that's overreacting. You're the one that's behaving badly. Let's not do this in front of our son. So there was an ongoing baiting and switching and then blocking the capacity to resolve something all the way through by blaming me or blaming somebody else who thwarted whatever they saw as important. They are highly vindictive, meaning if they think that you've done something to them, they will up the ante in spades and come back around and try to do something 10 times worse to you. What that could mean is a sociopath thinks nothing of ruining a perfectly innocent person's reputation. They think nothing of lying and presenting a lie to the public at large about a particular individual. One of the things that my ex-husband used to do was he would write a child support check to me. And almost every month, there would be no money in that account. And I was struggling. I was trying to make ends meet. And I would go to the bank and I would try to cash his check, and there would be no money in the account. And so I would get very upset and very emotional. And sometimes I even cried there. And then he would call me and he would say, the bank doesn't ever want you to go there again because you behave so badly when you're in the bank. The issue here is that he set me up, denying me the child support money that I needed to keep the roof over our head at the time. And then the setup was I'm reactive, and then I'm the one that's being blamed. So I was quite often in my marriage the scapegoat, and even afterwards. And in general, sociopaths will make you think that you're the one that's got it wrong. You're overreactive. You're over-emotional. You're not seeing the situation as it really is. The problem lies with you and not them. So when we think of morality, at least when I think of morality, I think of somebody who has a connection to source consciousness, who understands the difference between good and evil, right and wrong, who understands what it means to be a good person. But the average sociopath does not really have much of a moral compass. And if they do, it's roving, meaning that it's somewhat inconsistent. So they might be morally appropriate in one situation, and then without any morality, without any scruples, or without in any way considering how their behavior will impact others, they might behave quite differently in another situation. So they're inconsistent in any kind of moral presentation, and they don't really subscribe to any kind of religious or cultural notions of what proper behavior really is. So if we use religion as a touchstone and a place for us to gain values from, this is an individual who doesn't find value in any place other than themselves. This is Sophia Amargi. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed my show. I hope that you enjoyed the parts of my own story that I was able to share with you. And I, as always, want to hear your thoughts, your comments, your experiences. So feel free to contact us with that. And until next time, thank you so much.